Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So if we could round up people out in the hall. God, it is lovely outside. I just went over to the hotel and set the alarm on my phone for half an hour and just fell asleep. So I'm refreshed. It won't last, I can tell you that. But yes, this is the first 60-some degree day we've had this calendar year, isn't it? I think. God, there's a smell of lawns being mowed out there. What's up with that? So this afternoon, we're going to get more into what are your peers doing. And you know, there's nothing more nerve-wracking than getting up in front of a group of your peers and telling them what you're doing, because it's fairly, you know, revealing of your intellect and how your brain works. So be kind. But I think there's some excellent presentations this afternoon for you that I think you'll be learning a lot. I know I have. The first speaker is Blundon. He's forest fisheries biologist on the Willamette National Forest. Actually, the assistant fisheries biologist, I always get you guys. Nikki is the aquatics manager. She runs the pool. And Brett does the fish stuff. So I'd asked Brett to talk about NetMap for understanding riparian landscapes, and Brett, being the overachiever he is, has brought in all kinds of other models that he's gotten really excited about that I think you'll see a lot of utility with, correct? Yes. So help me welcome Brett Blundon.
Thanks, Cheryl. You'll notice the name of the talk did change, and really I can't talk about NetMap without putting it into some sort of context and talking about some of these other landscape modeling tools with it. And I am the assistant forest fish biologist, so you're getting an 18% discount on this talk right now. So just like to say right off the bat, I am not a modeling expert, and I'm not even that great with computers, but there are a lot of folks out there that work for the Forest Service that are. And then also I'll be talking about the Aquatic Conservation Strategy Objectives, which is definitely a Forest Service, federal term. So if you don't work for the Forest Service or BLM, or you're just not interested, you can disregard that first part. Just a little quick primer on Aquatic Conservation Strategy Objectives. If you look under the Riparian Reserve section under Aquatic Conservation Strategy Objectives, you'll see there's nine of these objectives that we need to meet. And part of some of the standards and guides in there is if we're going to go in and treat these using basically silvicultural practices, that we need to be entering the riparian reserves for reasons that are needed to attain the Aquatic Conservation Strategy Objectives. And that's on page C32 of the ROD, that document right there. Another part of it is that aquatic conservation strategy objectives are really supposed to be analyzed at the watershed and landscape scales, and for the purpose of protecting habitat for fish and other riparian dependent species. So just some key points, kind of the flip side of this watershed and landscape scales is that ACSOs are not attained at the unit scale. Restoration is for the benefit of aquatic and riparian dependent species. Treatments will maintain and or restore landscape scale processes. And then I added this last part with the trade-off of a site-specific scale impacts. And that we should also be striving to identify and quantify these trade-offs. So here's kind of a conceptual framework that Nikki and Johan and myself worked on putting together. So for addressing the ACSOs, the kind of a first step would be perform a landscape analysis of the watershed and or project area. That's not the 5th field watershed, probably 6 field watersheds is about the right scale to be using. Identify the landscape processes that have been degraded through either human activity or otherwise. Identify active and passive treatments that will move towards the attainment of these landscape processes. I highlight this passive treatments. We don't do a very good job of identifying any passive treatments, things that we've looked at and just decide to leave alone. And then the last part, identify trade-offs and quantify and describe outcomes, including a temporal component, like, you know, if we're going to have site scale impacts to a unit, what's expected time to recovery. So just kind of a picture here, we're really going from the landscape scale down to a unit scale, not the reverse, not going to the unit and trying to make it fit back up into these landscape processes. So here's some of these landscape analysis tools. We've got just our traditional overlays like plan association guides, fire history, soils, et cetera, et cetera. There's LiDAR, some different types of imagery, and I'll show you all these. And really, we can use these to kind of get to this existing condition. Where and why do we do treatment where we do it? And really identification of these disrupted landscape processes. And then when we're looking at some of the effects of the action, there's NetMap that can help us to spatially identify and quantify these impacts. And it's also a great way to look for some potential ways to mitigate some of the treatments we do. So here's the example I'm using. This is the Green Mountain project area. This is up on the McKenzie River Ranger District, and it is a very large planning area. It's 4 6-field watersheds. It's up near Cougar Reservoir. The Three Sisters Wilderness is on the east side. Go to the next one. Here's just a overview of the fire regime of that landscape. So in the red, you've got this high severity and low frequency, so you'd expect intense burns on a long time period. And then in this yellowish, greenish color, this is your mixed severity fire, where you expect kind of a mosaic effect across the landscape. If we look at the fire history up there, this is what we have at least mapped in GIS. If you talk to the fire guys, there may be a few more in here, but you can see that we've done a very good job at putting out fires. We even have people that will jump out of a perfectly good plane into a fire armed with nothing but a shovel, and they do a pretty good job. But here's a different type of disturbance. Here's the management history in this watershed, and you can see it's been pretty intensely managed throughout here. The purple colors are 0 to 40 for the dark purple, 40 to 80 for the light purple, and then the greens are some of your older stands. And you can see over here in the wilderness area, it's quite dominated by this older age class. Soils, here's some unstable soil landforms, mostly concentrated up here by the head of the reservoir. And plan association groups. I am by no means an expert in plan association groups, but you can kind of learn a little bit about the physical environment and maybe what you'd expect to come back after you did some management. But talk to your silviculturist. This is definitely an IDT process, and they'll help work through these. And then, of course, ESA listed fish distribution. This is not important in itself, other than I wanted to talk about fish a little bit because I'm a fish biologist. So just kind of a summary of these. We were asked to tell you how hard are these to use, how useful are they. So the benefit is they're very easy to use. You really don't have to have any computer skills. They can be quickly produced. The drawbacks are they're very coarse scale analysis. Not much quantification of those attributes. They make a lot of assumptions about the vegetation based on when they were harvested. 0 to 40, 40 to 80, but it doesn't really tell you what's the stand structure of that in there, what's your hardwood component, et cetera, et cetera. But these can be produced by your local GIS specialist. All you have to do is submit a ticket and have them made. LiDAR. This is pretty interesting. We've been looking at this recently. This is your typical bare earth LiDAR map. You can clearly see the roads and your streams and drainages in here. You can see the historic channels. It's got a high resolution. This is 1 meter resolution. Bare earth is pretty powerful just for looking at your underlying structures. It can also, LiDAR, you can have it automatically delineate your stream network. So if you look up here, this orange color is our typical NHD flow line that comes off the corporate database, and these blue and red lines are a couple different simulations that LiDAR ran to delineate these stream networks a little bit better. You can see it's quite a bit more precise for that. The other component of LiDAR that's very interesting is the vegetation. So without going into it in too much detail, the returns, you get these cloud points of the vegetation, and from that you can look at horizontal diversity of canopy structure, you can look at canopy closure, et cetera, et cetera. There's many things you can do with vegetation. I don't have time to go into them all, but I will get into one of them. Here is canopy height. This is just kind of on a spectrum. The white dots are your highest canopies, your tallest trees. Your dark dots are these smaller trees. Over here, this is across the river. This is in the wilderness section. You can see it's mainly dominated by these large old trees. And in your, over here on the managed side, you can see there's a lot more of the younger trees. So we can estimate some of these vegetation attributes like crown cover by height strata. So what you can do is essentially lay in these 5-meter stratas, and you can calculate how much of the canopy falls below that line. And you can do this all the way up through the canopy to determine, you know, where's the dominant portion of this canopy at. So using that, you can use another program called eCognition, and it'll digitize all this information for you. These small polygons here are not that important, but eCognition will draw these to, you know, combine different cells that have similar attributes. But anyways, this was an example that I went up to the regional office and worked with the RO folks, and we put in a simple formula to look for multi-storied canopies. So essentially, we just looked at the standard deviation, the average standard deviation between those point clouds. So the more standard deviation you have, you'd expect to have multiple canopies in there. If it had a small standard deviation, we'd expect it was a single-story canopy. So we just did a real simple formula, and eCognition picks up pretty much exactly what you'd expect, all these younger managed stands, and digitizes them for you, and you can quantify that and look at the distribution across the landscape. So LiDAR summary benefits: it's super high resolution, high precision. You can identify many characteristics across the landscape, both physical and the vegetation. And the idea is that you can use this to kind of focus some of that field work from data collection to more of this big picture resource objective. Instead of going out and mapping streams, maybe thinking about it more in terms of what am I really interested in these streams and riparian reserves. Many uses, I don't have time to go into them all, and I couldn't even claim to scratch the surface on the potential for these. The drawbacks of it, though, are it's quite expensive, $600 per square mile. You need to have a minimum order of about 250 square miles, so it can add up. You definitely need some technical expertise to be able to run these programs and develop the LiDAR. It does require field verification. The vegetation data is a snapshot in time. Of course, the bare earth is great we can use it for stream restoration, many other uses, but I'm not sure what length of time that vegetation data would really be accurate for. And it definitely requires some advanced planning. You need to schedule your flights about a year prior to the project. But there is help. You can call Pete Heinzen or Jim, whatever his last name is, at the U.S. Forest Service Remote Sensing Group, if you're a Forest Service employee, of course, and they would help you answer any questions. They will actually, if you fly LiDAR, they provide you the product all worked up, and then there's many other little calculations you can do to look at some of the veg characteristics and that kind of thing. But certainly there's help. I don't know how to develop LiDAR, but I got it, so it's great. The next one is NAPE imagery. We all have access to this in the imagery in GIS. This is the NAPE imagery shoots in 4 different spectrums of light, 3 visible, 1 non-visible, red, blue, green, and infrared. And in NAPE imagery, infrared reflects at a different rate if it's going through the hardwood canopy. And so you can kind of pick out here, you've got this brighter orange color. This is a big hardwood patch. You've got some bigger conifers in here and some pretty young conifers down in this area. There's a new satellite that was launched, and it's called Worldview Satellite, and it shoots in 8 spectrums of light. And these things just pop out after you look at compared to the NAPE imagery. All these teal portions are openings. You can digitize the openings. You could digitize the hardwood components. And then you could look at the spatial distribution of these things. Does it match up with what you'd expect? So the benefits of the imagery, you can get spatial distribution of hardwoods versus conifers. It avoids assumptions regarding species composition in some of these stands. Only requires modest GIS skills to be able to do that. And it's free, actually. It's a private satellite, but apparently the Department of Defense has it contracted, and federal agencies can slip their projects in there. With one caveat, I believe that it might go offline here soon. So, limited time offer. Call Pete. You can try. The next tool I wanted to talk about was NetMap. So once you've identified some of the areas that you might want to treat in these riparian reserves, you could use NetMap. It's a spatial modeling tool, and the thermal loading tool will take into account topographic shading, the azimuth of the stream, heights of vegetation, all those kind of attributes. And this diagram right here is a depiction of the difference between a bare earth projection and a vegetation projection. So essentially it's a sensitivity analysis. Where on the landscape is harvest or is canopy manipulation going to be sensitive to thermal loading? And it's a great way to look at it. It's a great tool. The only issue is that I believe it needs to be validated here. These are watts per square meter, but I don't think any of us really know, is this a lot? This is just a simple quantile regressions. So it's one drawback of that right now, but I believe folks are working on that. But we ran this a couple different simulations, change in radiation loading, having a 60-foot buffer on these streams. You can see that NetMap predicts there'd be a very small increase in radiation across all channel widths, less than 1%. And if we had a thinning with no buffer on it, it looks like you'd get as much as a 6% increase prediction on some of these wider channel widths. So it's an interesting tool to be able to kind of see where you're at on the landscape, identify those sensitive areas, and focus your field work. Wood recruitment. So NetMap will run some wood models, and in all cases, the treated stands, you're going to have a reduction in, if you just treat the stand, you're going to have a reduction in wood recruitment through time. And what we're looking at here is the area under the curve. This is by year, you'd sum up all these years, area under the curve. So in all cases, you're going to have a reduction in wood recruitment through time, according to this model. This is the untreated stand here, and these are stands with a double entry, so with a leave of between 10 and 15% of the trees that are in there. So under those scenarios, if you go in and treat the stand, fall and leave, or tip the trees, you'd end up with more wood recruitment than the untreated version. So this might be a method of mitigation. Again, I was saying you could identify some mitigation measures using this tool. You're still going to have a wood recruitment impact there. So, but that's not the total point. The total point is we're supposed to be looking at this at a landscape level. So if you come in here, here's a stream running through here. This is predominantly small trees, definitely mid-zero, 100% closed canopy, and you've got some small patches of older trees in here. What is, if you're going in here to treat, you should be identifying some landscape processes that you're trying to restore of those ACS objectives. And you might have a site scale impact on wood recruitment. And that's going to, you would still maintain ACS objectives because you have a very large portion of the stream that's going to be your primary source of wood recruitment. And when you overlay all these different models on top of each other, you look at the debris flow paths, you look at the wood recruitment models, you can really identify where your source wood is. And that's the key point here, is that you need to identify where is your wood coming from. It doesn't come from everywhere equally. So just another tool. But you can see here in all cases, if you were just to do a traditional thinning without any fallen leaf, you would have a decrease in your site scale wood availability. NetMap will also run debris flows. Here's the debris flow analysis it predicts. Some of these headwater streams have the potential for debris flow that might alter the treatment options you do in that area. Erosion potential. This is just a zoomed in version of this wilderness side. The debris flow potential might change your treatment options in those areas. So just a summary in NetMap. Benefits are you can get quantitative measures of the potential effects. You can run a sensitivity analysis on the landscape. You can experiment with different treatment scenarios before you do anything. Does not require much upfront planning. You can do this. These tools are going to be available soon, and you can run these from your desk. Relatively easy to use, and it's currently free. Drawbacks, the validation of the tools is still needed, and there are folks working on that. Need other modeling inputs. Some of these wood recruitment models require FVS model runs, so you'd have to have some familiarity with that. So NetMap for ArcMap 10 is going to be available soon, and you can visit netmaptools.org to get those. So just a summary, landscape analyses really take some upfront planning and investment. This is really on the left side of the triangle. It's an excellent way to go into collaborations where somewhere to start. So you have a bunch of overlays, and you can really look at the landscape and see what's out there. There are certainly other methods of analysis to comply with the ACSOs. This is just one idea. And these analyses certainly aren't meant to be prescriptive. They're just to limit the reconnaissance time out there in the field, that focus your efforts on resource objectives. And the field work is still going to be necessary to verify all these model results. And I'd just like to thank Nikki Swanson and Johan Hogerborst, Peter Heinzen from the RO Remote Sensing Office, and Jeremy Hobson, Intergalactic GIS Superstar, and Lee Benda from NetMap for helping me out with some of these model runs. And with that, I'd take any questions.
So plenty of time for questions for Brett. That was whirlwind. In the back.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's currently free. Does that mean it's going to simply not be free?
NetMap? Mm-hmm. Yes, NetMap is currently free, and it may not be. They may need to require a subscription fee to keep these models up and going. They do take work, maintenance. So someday in the future.
The aquatic conservation strategy, as it was adopted in Northwest Forest Plan, had very broad purposes. Partly it was to protect the streams, but there was also a host of terrestrial wildlife that were supposed to be benefited by the riparian reserve. I'm noticing sort of an emphasis on wood recruitment to the stream and microclimate maintenance at the stream center. I want to make sure we don't lose sight of the need for wood recruitment in the upland portion of the riparian reserve and the microclimate, out to the edge of the inner tree buffer.
No, you're absolutely correct. This is these models would be the way you'd want to work these is with an IDT. You'd want to make sure that you talk to your wildlife biologist, your botanist. This really is an interdisciplinary resource and would need to be analyzed as such.
So, do you have an example of how NetMap analysis has shaped some of your project proposals?
Repeat the question.
She's asking if we have an example of how NetMap analysis has shaped some of our project analyses. And the example that Johan gave earlier with the cool soda is the first one that I've used it on, and I believe that Kate Meyer with the McKinsey Ranger District and Ray Rivera, I believe they've used it previously to identify some places for some fallen leaf treatment. I'm not sure if we have any specific examples of where we've used NetMap to determine where the project's going to be. I would say Green Mountain would probably be the real shining first example. And I may be wrong, but that's what I know about. Okay, thank you.
So I committed the ultimate government sin in that I cut your lunch break off by 10 minutes. Did anybody else notice that? I am so sorry. I guess my nap was really refreshing. It just threw my brain off. I don't even know what time it is anymore.